Service package was developed in the context of growing interest in MHPSS, particularly in humanitarian work. And we've seen a big increase in MHPSS activities integrated into many areas of work, including health, child protection, education, gender-based violence, livelihoods programming, and beyond that. And we've also seen a lot more donor interest and political will to support MHPSS. There's been a lot of high-level meetings in the last few years about how we're doing in terms of MHPSS and where the gaps remain. And something that came up again and again in a lot of these high-level discussions is that while there has been this great growth in recognition of MHPSS as important and many, many more people doing MHPSS activities, there's still quite a lot of variation in what MHPSS actually looks like and how MHPSS is understood and the different kinds of activities that people do. So while existing guidance provided a good starting point, agencies that were implementing MHPSS were saying that they felt they needed more information on how to choose between different MHPSS activities to make sure that their work is of high quality and evidence informed and impactful. And at the same time, from a funding perspective, donors were saying, well, we want to fund MHPSS, but we need more information on what the priority non-negotiable activities are and how much funding we actually need to dedicate to these activities. And so the idea for the minimum service package, or MSP, has evolved from these discussions. And it's also grown in scope over time. So initially, the package was looking at MHPSS within health and child protection services. And it was led by WHO and UNICEF at that point. But very quickly, we realized that that wasn't enough and that we needed much more attention to MHPSS in other sectors like education, and more donors came on board that were able to support us to integrate these other sectors like gender-based violence, education, and so on. And so the development of the package involved consultations with hundreds of different MHPSS staff in different sectors, the different clusters and areas of responsibilities, and many versions and reviews and revisions over 3 years, and also extensive piloting during that time. So the package has been released now as an IASC product, and I'm just going to give you, if it works, I'm going to try and show you a brief video giving you a little bit more of the background and purpose of the package.
The number of people affected by humanitarian crises is at a record high. Armed conflicts, natural disasters, and public health emergencies like COVID-19 cause widespread suffering and seriously affect people's mental health and psychosocial well-being. Many people affected lose everything they care about: their loved ones, homes and livelihoods, their communities, their sense of place and sense of self. Yet resources for mental health and psychosocial support services are severely lacking. This leaves many people in severe distress and without the care they need. More than 85% of people affected by mental health conditions in humanitarian settings do not receive treatment. Where services do exist, they are often disconnected and inconsistent. Service providers often lack the training and support they need to provide safe and effective services. Humanitarian donors often don't know which MHPSS activities they should fund, and those planning and implementing programs are faced with tough decisions about what to prioritize. The MHPSS Minimum Service Package outlines the minimum MHPSS activities that should be implemented in all emergency settings across health, protection, education, as as well as a range of other sectors that contribute directly and indirectly to MHPSS outcomes. The package is based on existing guidelines and extensive consultations with people involved in humanitarian assistance in frontline, regional, and global roles. It is designed to support humanitarian actors too. Improve coordination between different sectors, identify MHPSS program gaps and priorities, provide timely MHPSS programs based on evidence and guidelines, increase funding allocation for MHPSS, improve coverage of MHPSS activities, and ultimately, improve the mental health and psychosocial well-being of people affected by humanitarian crises. With the collaboration from humanitarian actors around the world, the MSP can play a key role in helping people to recover and rebuild their lives after an emergency.
Okay, and so who is the MSP actually for? Well, we hope it will be useful for a wide range of actors, so people planning and designing MHPSS strategies and programs and responses, whether as part of preparedness or as part of an actual emergency response like we have in Turkey and now. Also for coordinators, so this includes MHPSS technical working groups like yourselves. The technical working group has a very crucial role to play in terms of raising awareness about MHPSS and minimum activities, but also other coordination groups like the health, education, protection, child protection, different coordination mechanisms. GBV as well is another important one. And any other coordination groups that might want to know more about how MHPSS fits into humanitarian response. It's also useful for implementing partners and technical advisors. So the MSP is designed to help people actually plan, budget, and implement specific MHPSS activities. And also donors, like I mentioned, one of the key demands for the MSP came from donors, and we hope it will help them to make funding decisions that are informed by the evidence and best practice guidelines. So I'll hand over now to Vanya, who's going to walk you through the structure of the MSP and what it actually looks like. Over to you, Vanya.
Thank you, Cleva. So let's look at what is included in the MSP and what it actually looks like. So the main package consists of 22 activities. Now, it is important to note that no single organization is expected to implement the entire MSP. Rather, relevant organizations must coordinate and work together across sectors, AORs, to ensure that MSP activities are implemented and that a comprehensive response is delivered in each geographical area. Now, there's a lot of information here in this image, so don't worry about trying to read it all now. I just want to give you an overview so you can see that each activity here in each row is tagged with colored icons representing different sectors and AORs such as health, protection, education, shelter, etc. So the colorful icons indicate sectors or AORs that are typically well placed to actually implement the activity, whereas the dark blue icons that you also see there indicate sectors and AORs that have a role to play in supporting the activity. So, for example, child protection actors will provide group activities for children, but camp coordination and camp management actors might facilitate this by providing the space, by notifying the community in the camp about when these activities are happening and where they are taking place. So moving on to the next slide, the 22 MSP activities are organized into 4 sections. Each section focuses on a slightly different type of activity, from interagency activities to activities about designing effective programs to programmatic MHPSS activities. Let's have a closer look at this. So this slide shows you the 22 activities again. We will quickly describe the sections now so you can understand the structure of the package, but please don't worry about trying to read it all. You can explore these at your own pace. So let's have a look at section 1 on the left-hand side on the slide. This section focuses on interagency coordination and assessment for the MHPSS response. So these activities are particularly relevant to technical working groups and other coordination groups as they rely on interagency work. Then section 2 is just below. It lists essential components of all MHPSS programs. So these are activities that any organization engaging in any type of MHPSS activity should be doing, such as thoughtful program design, developing systems for M&E, for staff well-being, and supporting staff competencies. Now, section 2, which is on the right side of the slide, contains the programmatic activity. And this is the main body of the MSP. It covers activities from community-wide messaging and supporting community self-help to focus support like psychological interventions and care and protection for people in psychiatric hospitals and other institutions. And finally, you can also see there section 4 on the bottom left of the slide. It contains activities focused on specific settings, so infectious disease outbreaks and also MHPSS for people deprived of their liberty. Now, again, please keep in mind that no single organization is expected to implement the entire MSP. Again, organizations are to coordinate and work together across sectors to ensure that a comprehensive response is in place. So moving on to the next slide. Each of those 22 activities comes with a brief introduction explaining why the activity is important, a checklist of actions to help implement the activity safely and effectively, additional actions for consideration that can be prioritized depending on context-specific needs and available resources, and also key guidelines, standards, and tools. So under each activity, you will find these guidelines, standards, and tools that can support you in planning and implementing the activity in a safe and effective manner. So now I will hand it over to Cuiva that will walk you through how to use the MSP.
Thanks, Vanya. So the MSP is available in 2 formats. It's available as a PDF that you can download, but also as an interactive web platform. So I'm now going to show you another video that just gives you a kind of a virtual tour of the platform so you can see where to find all those different components that Vanya mentioned.
The MSP platform is available at MHPSS You can use the buttons on the top right corner of the page to log in or sign up to access the platform. You can also toggle between different languages. Once you log in, you'll see that the platform has 3 main sections: the Home tab, the MSP Guide tab, and the All Activities tab. The Home tab provides a brief overview of the package. The MSP Guide provides a more detailed introduction, explaining what the MSP is, why it's needed, how it can be used, and how it was developed. The guide also includes a section on general principles and considerations that are critical to the safe and effective implementation of the MSP. From the guide menu, you can also download a shorter PDF version of the MSP. The All Activities tab lists the 22 MSP activities. From here, you can click on any activity to access a brief introduction to the activity, a checklist of core actions, additional actions for consideration, and a list of relevant guidelines, standards, and tools. Some activities contain additional information, such as key considerations specific to the activity, and lists of recommended training topics for staff implementing the activity. The MSP platform will continue to be updated with translations and user improvements during the piloting phase. All registered users will receive
Sorry, I'm having some difficulties with the video there, but you got the main points. And just to say that since we made that video, there have been some updates to the platform as well. So you no longer actually have to log in to access anything. All the main content is publicly available without any login. You only need to log in if you want to use the interactive checklists so that you can save your progress to your own profile, or if you want to use the gap analysis tool, you need to log in to save your data as well. But otherwise you can access everything without logging in. We have also added a filter function, so you can go to the list of all the activities, and if you only want to see, for example, activities that are typically led by health, you can just select health or child protection or a combination of the different sectors. We've also added a search bar, which makes it very easy to find relevant content, on specific issues. So if you wanted to see everything that we have available to do with MHPSS for people with disabilities or adolescents or whatever it is, that's quite a useful way to find the relevant information. And then, like I mentioned, it's all the main content is all available as PDF as well. So you can download the PDFs from the website. The online interactive version is a little bit more comprehensive in that it has all the links to all the different relevant guidelines and standards. It has links to video orientations and to this virtual tour that I just showed you and things like that. The PDF is designed to be a little bit shorter and more print friendly, but it still has a link throughout to all the relevant online content. So at the moment, the MSP, the final version that has been released by the IASC is only available in English right now, but we're working on releasing Arabic, French, Spanish, Ukrainian, Polish, and Hungarian versions, and there are other languages in the pipeline. We don't have a Turkish version in progress at the moment, but if anyone has resources and the interest to translate it into Turkish, please do get in touch with us, because I think it would be very useful to have it in Turkish as well. And now I'm going to hand over to Vanya to give you an overview of some additional tools that are available to accompany the MSP. Over to you, Vanya.
Thank you, Quiva. So the minimum service package also includes additional planning tools. Let's have a quick look. So the gap analysis tool is live on the MSP website, and I will show it to you in a minute. And it's sort of a live worksheet that lets you know how you are doing in terms of the implementation of each MSP activity. The costing tool is we're just wrapping up, so it will be made available soon on the website as well. And it supports coordinators, donors, program managers with costing MSP activities. And we are also working on an indicator guide. Let's have a quick look at the gap analysis tool. So the MSP gap analysis tool is available through the online platform, as you can see here. This tool is for use of MHPSS technical working groups to assess and map current MHPSS implementation and to identify gaps and prioritize activities. So the tool is designed to help you see which of the 22 activities are being implemented in a particular geographical area and which are not. The results can then be used by technical working groups and other coordination groups, donors, and also individual program planners to plan and prioritize programming. So let's have a closer look now at a simplified version of the tool that we have been working on and that will be made available online soon. So as you can see here, you would go through each MSP activity, which is on the left-hand side of the slide, and you would determine its status. Is it not implemented in the given geographical area? Is the implementation ongoing, or is it not applicable? Now, note that in principle, all the activities would be applicable, as these are the minimum activities in an MHPSS response. There could be cases, though, where, for example, in a given geographical area, there are no psychiatric hospitals. In those instances, you would not be able to implement activities that are specific to that setting. So within each activity status, you will also be asked for specific information. So for example, the activity is not being implemented, but is it planned though? What are the challenges related to the fact that it's not being implemented? If the implementation is ongoing, who is implementing? Where is that taking place? What is the geographical coverage? What is the demographic coverage? And if it's not applicable, of course, we will also ask you to provide some information on that front, and you are also able to add notes if relevant. So the gap analysis tool can also be used to keep track of changes over time. So you could do a gap analysis at the start of the emergency, then repeat it after, let's say, 6 months, a year, to keep track of changes over time in an easy to follow visual way. It's quite a useful tool, particularly for interagency coordination groups and governments, as a way of looking across the response as a whole. So let's move now to the costing tool. The costing tool is designed to support coordinators, donors, and program manager with costing MSP activities. We are just wrapping up the work on the tool, so it will be available for download on the MSP website very soon. In the tool, you can check which MSP activities you want to include in the costing. You just enter some basic information, for example, the country, the size of the affected population, the number of health facilities, and things like that. And it will give you an estimate of how much each of the activities cost and how much all of the activities cost together. It bases calculations on default values, but you are able to change these to improve accuracy. So for example, you can change default unit costs and select whether you plan to engage international staff or national staff for different roles and adjust the estimates accordingly. Let's have a closer look. So here you can see what the costing tool looks like at the moment. As of now, it is still an Excel sheet, and you can see here that you would enter the country, you would enter program information, such as the total population covered by the program. You would also enter some demographic information, and then you would also be able to, can you just, maybe we can see the next, yes, thank you, Cuiva. Then you'll also be able to, as I said before, revise the price of default values that you can see there for office costs and supplies, trainings, and meetings in such a way that the estimates that you would obtain in the end for the cost per activity and for the overall implementation of all activities is more accurate. So now moving on to the next slide. As well as the costing tool, you can also find a simple PDF that is available for download on the website that we call the activity budget tables. So this simply lists the items that you may need to consider when budgeting for an activity. It is designed as a memory aid for planning programs, so a reminder of which staff you might need to include, what materials and equipment you may need to implement the activity, and other costs like translations and so on. It can also help donors understand a range of budget considerations, for example, when they are releasing calls for proposals for MHPSS. And finally, we are currently working on an indicator guide. So this is a bank of indicators appropriate to each MSP activity. It draws from existing guidelines from education, child protection, GPV, etc. And also, of course, is in line with MHPSS Common Framework for M&E. So this we expect will be a tool that will support with writing proposals for funding MSP activities, strengthening M&E aspects of planned and current MHPSS programs, reviewing MHPSS plans and proposals of other agencies, agreeing or recommending common MHPSS indicators for use by different actors across the humanitarian response to allow data to be compiled for interagency reporting and planning. So now, now I will hand it over to Cuiva, and we're almost wrapping up. She will walk us through how the MSP can help you in your work. Over to you, Cuiva.
Thanks, Vanya. So I think we've provided quite a lot of detail and thrown a lot of information at you, but just to kind of step back and think, well, how can this actually be useful to you in your current roles and in your current situation? So this list isn't fully, comprehensive, but some headline ways in which people have found the MSP helpful so far. One of the main purposes of the MSP is to harmonize approaches and provide a common language for MHPSS activities. So it can provide a unifying framework to help provide clarity around what actually counts as MHPSS and what it typically looks like in different sectors like education, health, child protection, etc. And this can help us in conversations between different sectors, but it also makes things a lot easier for donors. It makes it easier for them to engage with and fund MHPSS if we're all speaking the same language and using the same terms to refer to different types of activities. So the MSP can also be useful in understanding who can contribute to what, in terms of outlining that which sectors and which types of actors typically deliver for each particular activity, while also emphasizing that many activities can be delivered by multiple sectors. So for example, group activities for child well-being are often delivered within child protection or education, for example, whereas safe spaces for women and girls are typically run specifically by GBV actors. So the MSP can also help with planning, when you're writing humanitarian response plans or refugee response plans, often these have to be done very quickly. And most of the time, the person who is asked to draft these plans is not an MHPSS specialist, but they are expected to include MHPSS activities. So the MSP can be very helpful in quickly identifying which activities typically go in which sector, in which section of the response plan, and provides language that can be quickly taken and added to plans in the first draft, before a specialist review and tailoring as needed. In terms of funding, again, the MSP can help you easily see what each activity entails and what budget is needed, so you don't come back later and realize, oh, we forgot to include funding for supervision, or we forgot to include funding for staff care. You can have a look at these tables while you're planning to make sure none of the critical elements are missed. And similarly, when you're actually designing programs within an implementing organization, the MSP has the checklists that we described. So it maps out concrete actions and steps that need to be taken to either strengthen existing activities or initiate any new activities that are missing. And like I said, that's not just for programmatic activities, but also things like developing systems for monitoring and evaluation, developing systems for staff well-being, things that we know are critical to high quality programming, but they're rarely mapped out concretely in proposals, and therefore historically they've not always been well funded because they haven't been seen in that concrete way, and the needs for resources hasn't always been recognized. And finally, the MSP can help you to find resources and curricula on different MHPSS topics. So we've got lists of resources that are available for each specific activity, but we also have a compilation of resources on MHPSS for particular at-risk groups. So where things have been published, for example, on MHPSS for children associated with armed forces, LGBTI people, where there's MHPSS resources specifically focusing on their needs, people with disabilities, survivors of torture, survivors of trafficking, older people, people in detention, people living with HIV, all of the resources that we could find that are specifically about MHPSS for those groups have been compiled, so they're easy to search and find as well. So finally, Vanya is just going to wrap up by telling you the next steps for the MSP at the global level.
Inka has just joined us, so I'll hand it over to you, Inka.
Yeah, it's actually me. I'm Inka Weisbecker at WHO. Apologies for joining a bit late. I had another important meeting, but great to see so many of you online. I just want to mention the next steps for the MHPSS MSP dissemination and uptake. We're continuing to update the MSP website and translating also the final version of the MSP PDF into multiple languages, including, for example, French, Arabic, Spanish, and others. If you have any specific requests for translations into specific languages or even resources to contribute towards that, please let us know and get in touch with us. We're also continuing to have MSP orientations and events such as this one. We're happy to schedule additional ones through MHPSS technical working groups or even for specific organizations working in humanitarian emergencies. We also continue to develop key materials and tools. During the 3-year development of the MSP, we identified a lot of gaps where actually more tools would be needed, and we have started to fill these gaps by developing additional materials. We're planning, for example, to have more on the MSP for different sectors, to have key message banks and things like that that we're working on. And we are also providing technical support for country-level MSP implementation. That is through a project funded by ECHO and led by UNICEF, where organizations can request technical support, also through MHPSS technical working groups at country level where they exist. If anyone is interested, yeah, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thank you, over.